Another one of our top 10 features are the addition of Arrowway textures. Arrowway is a company that produces very high quality textures, and you can buy them online. And these textures are carefully put together. The sample areas are very large. They're all image-based textures, and so the quality of them is very high. They have bump mapping and specular reflectivity and stuff all added in. It's difficult to give you an impression of what they're like, but let's just go ahead and show some of them. And we'll switch to the render tab here, and I'll render this in custom Renderworks. And let's go ahead and put something on here. So for example, here's a concrete. Some flooring. And you'll notice that you can't see the repeat pattern in here. That's because the sample size was so great. I mean, this is really just giving a very vague outline of what they're like, because when they're in a 3D model they actually look so much better. But just to give you a sense, now these are all going to be available, you'll see, in the default texture library. So when you go to choose a texture, as well as all the previous ones that used to be there, you're going to see all of these arrow ones, all of those concrete ones, all of those flooring ones, there's plaster, stonework, tiles, and right off down the bottom wood as well. So there's a lot to choose from, and really they do enhance 3D models greatly. Physical sun and sky. There's an interesting improvement in Renderworks that I've also rated as a top 10, and that is the ability now to have the time of day affect how the sky appears, and in turn how the light will then affect the model. So here you have a model rendered at midday, here you have the model rendered in the early evening, and the same model rendered at night. And you can see the sky is dark with stars here, and getting dark here with the sunset in the background and bright sunshine in the middle of the day. With the Heliodon tool, if I just place one of these here for a moment, you'll see that the tool has these new options: soft physical sun, physical sky, and warm colors. And these are what allows you to create these effects. I think the best way to demonstrate it is probably to watch a couple of movies. So we'll use our hyperlink tool to open two movies. This one goes from midnight through the day and all the way back to midnight again. And you can see the color of the sky changing and the colors in the model changing as well. And then this one is from dawn to dusk. So whether you're doing a movie or just a static render, the time of day and the effect that the color from the sky has on the model is now going to be much more realistic. Non-blocking rendering. Now this one will be a real time saver for those who use Renderworks and have to wait for a render to finish before they can continue working. This slightly technical term means that when you're rendering a viewport or rendering using the render bitmap tool, you can continue working on your file. So here we have some objects on a design layer, and I've created a viewport of this. Let's go to that viewport and we'll set this viewport to render, and then we'll return back to the design layer. So selecting the viewport, we'll click Update, and you're going to see a little teapot appear here. Now we'll go back to the non-blocking rendering, and so here I am back on the design layer. The little teapot here is still ticking away, indicating there's some rendering going on in the background. So I could take the render bitmap tool now and render a portion of my design layer, and that's going to get placed in the queue, and when its processor is available, it will start rendering itself. I can even start another one here. And even move this one around while the rendering is taking place. So you can see we've got these two. We've done a couple of renderings, so we've been doing some manipulation on these design layers, and the viewport has now finished updating. So if we go back to the viewport, you'll see that it's updated here as well. So I think this feature is really going to save a lot of time, because you can set the viewports to render in the background and then go on working in the file or on another file. Cinema4D Export. This function has improved greatly in Vectorworks 2013, and you'll get a much higher fidelity in the translation process and be able to better map the things from Vectorworks into Cinema4D. The other improvement is that the export command is now in Vectorworks fundamentals, so all modules have the export to Cinema4D commands in them now, whereas previously it was only if you had Renderworks that they were available. Improved plant settings. In Vectorworks 2013 you're going to see a great improvement in the way that the plant settings dialog has been laid out, and it also provides additional functionality. Let's take a look at that. We'll select the plant tool and click on the settings button up here in the toolbar. So the first thing you'll see is that you can edit the actual plant definitions here, and then you also have a separate set of options to define how all of your plants will behave when they're inserted into the drawing. So if we look at the edit definition one first, here you'll see that you've got the usual insertion options, the usual schedule options, the render options, and the plant data options. Over here, this copy from symbol button is new, so if you have another plant that you want to use the 2D and or 3D graphic from, you can click this copy from symbol button and choose to use the 2D, 3D or 2D and 3D components of the other symbol for this current one. So here you'll see if I click here, I could access say this symbol. Let's pick one you can actually see, this one here, and choose to just use the 2D component, click OK. So now I've replaced the graphic that this symbol uses with a graphic from another symbol or another plant. For the actual insertion options and the other ones that apply to all plants, you'll now see two new options here, custom spread and custom height, and if you check these, it means that individual symbol instances can have their spread and height varied in the object info palette. So you might have a single instance of this acacia, but you can show it at a couple of different sizes and still have it listed as the same plant. Previously you had to duplicate a plant to have it show at different sizes for the same species. You'll see that you've got your annotation options, your rendering options, and just generally it's more logically set out. Your tag and schedule options, and here you can choose to add these things if you want, and that will then become editable. Improved plant options. In the previous slide we did talk about the ability to customize the height and spread of plants, the same species, and here is an example of this. So you'll see now that in the object info palette, because I chose that option for the insertion options for the plant tool, the spread and height now become ungrayed, and I can then edit these fields. So if I wanted to make this instance of the same plant a little smaller or bigger, I can simply change the number in the object info palette, and I now have the same plant showing on the drawing but in two different sizes. And using this same technology, I guess, it flows on to groups of plants, because now you will see that the plant scale allows you to have a random size, and this just gives a little bit more realism so that everything's not exactly the same. So you can random size it to 5, 10 or 15%. So this way you get a slightly more real indication of how the plants might look. Another feature that I think will be appreciated is when you're doing hedging. Now this all works well and good when the line of hedge is horizontal or vertical, but when it goes off at an angle or when it is on a curve, then it doesn't really work. So now you're going to see that under plant rotation, as well as the previous horizontal and long line, horizontal and random, you've now got a long line. And when we choose this option, you'll see that the plants automatically then follow the line that you've defined for them. So you get a much more realistic looking hedge that will follow curves or diagonal lines. And here's our plant schedule with these things in it, just indicating the images that we've talked about previously. And all of our schedules, so up here in reports, when you go to choose schedule, you're going to see that all of the OzCAD ones now come without and with images. So all of the previous ones are there, but we've also added an additional one to each of the previous OzCAD ones that include the plant images. Site modifier improvements. There are two here that I want to talk about in particular. The first is the ability to create a pad from grade limits. Previously you were able to create a fence or a grade limit from a pad, and now the reverse has been added, and the other one is the pad with retaining edge. So let's take a look at these. We'll start with this one first. So what we've done on this site model is that we have a site modifier here which is set to grade limits, previously known as a fence. So essentially we're saying here we don't want to modify the terrain beyond this area here, and this may have been defined by a setback from the boundaries of the site or whatever. And what we want to do is to construct a building in here, so we want to create a level area inside here that doesn't require any cut or fill to be added or removed from the site. So we want this to be as sustainable as possible, and we can use this new command to ask Vectorworks to generate this area inside here to put our building on, simply by selecting the grade limits modifier, going to the landmark menu and going to create pad from grade limits. That's the previous one that I mentioned a moment ago, create grade limits from pad. So this is a reverse. Click OK. We can set the batter slope. We'll go with 20 degrees. We don't want it any more than that. And when we click OK, this is the pad that has been created. So if we now update the site model, you're going to see that it takes on these characteristics, and if we look at this in 3D, you'll see that what we've got here is our grade limits or fence around the outside here. We've got slopes no greater than 20 degrees, and that's given us an area here for our pad where we can construct and there's an even amount of cut and fill. So all the cut that has come out of this area up here has gone into this area down here, and it's completely balanced. And you'll see that if we update the cut and fill calculations, you'll see that the net cut and fill is very, very close, 3.2 cubic meters. The next site modifier improvement I want to talk about is the Create Pad with Retaining Edge, and this allows you to create straight-sided recesses in a site model for, say, something like a swimming pool or a basement or an underground car park or something like that. So let's open the file and take a look at how this works. So here we have a site model, and let's assume that we need to modify it to fit this house in. And what I'm going to do is to assume that down this end of the site we want the house to be essentially level with the site, and then it's going to be cut into the site up on this left hand side. So we'll move this out of the way so that we can have a look at this, and I'll begin by taking the site modifier tool and drawing the shape that I want, and I won't worry too much about the house there. I'll just try and guess where it would have been. So I'm going to draw down to here with the site modifier tool, and I'm going to trace around this contour line here, and you'll see why I'm doing this in a moment. It doesn't have to be perfectly accurate. So let's say it comes back up there, and then it comes in, and then it needs to cut in here. We'll pick up that point there, come down, and so here we've got our site modifier, and currently it's set to a grade limits configuration. We're going to change it to pad with retaining edge. Now when you create these, you actually don't need a grade limits or fence, but we do have that on here anyway. This dashed blue line is a grade limits, so we'll leave that there because you'll see that I can utilize that in a moment. So with this selected, we need to pick the base level that we want this to be at, and I'm going to choose 13.5 meters because that is the level of this contour line that we traced here. So let's go to a right ISO view and have a look at what we've got here. So it looks like at this point just a normal pad, but what I'm going to do now is to use the send to surface command to send the second control line up to the surface. And you can see what's happened now. I've got two control lines, one which represents the base of this cutout and another which represents the edge around the existing site model. Now we need to update the model. So let's go ahead and click the update button, and you'll see that straight away this has cut into the site exactly as we wanted, with vertical faces and a completely clean base. And this is another new feature in Vectorworks 2013. You don't see the lines all across here anymore. So if we render that, you'll see that we've got this edge around here exactly as you would need to fit the building into that recess. Now because it is a pad, you're still able to add a slope to it. So if I put, say, a 5-degree slope on here, this slope is actually going down that way towards the back of the site, which is probably not what you want, but let's just update this again to see what change that has made. So that's created a deeper hole at the back, and it's actually brought this up proud with above the edge at the bottom here. This is not something that you'd actually want to do, but just to demonstrate that you actually can have a slope here. And if we went back to a plan view and reversed this slope so that it did actually come right down to the bottom edge like this, and we update the model, and we'll go back to that previous view, then you can see that that 5-degree slope almost matches the slope of the land. So if I set this to, say, a lesser slope, say 1 degree, you can see what's happened now. We can update the site model and you can see the result. Now the other interesting thing about this new pad configuration is that we did send the top of this to the surface of the site model, but that's not essential. You can actually modify each of these corner points manually. If I double click the site modifier, you'll see that the points around the perimeter have become available, and if I move the cursor over one of them, I can actually drag the point up or down in the Z direction. So if I drag this down to that point and maybe drag this up higher, and you can see it's telling me what the elevation is, but I'll just move those 2 points, perhaps this one down to there. This is when I update the site model, it's now going to use our grade limits around the outside here to determine what happens between this modifier and this grade limiter. So let's go ahead and do that, update, and you can see what's happened here. The model has, we've still got these vertical edges here, but because they don't conform with the existing site, then it's being modified out to the grade limit that we have out there. Now if I wanted to restore this back to how it was, I can select this again, go to the landmark menu, choose send to surface, and this will get sent back to the original site model surface. If we update, then it will go back to how it was. So quite a lot of flexibility and power, I think, in this new pad with retaining edge site modifier. There's one final site model improvement that I want to mention, and that is that you can now control all of the graphic attributes of a site model using classes. So this makes it much easier to get consistency between files and between site models, because once you've defined the classes and given the graphic attributes to those classes, then they will control all of these things that the site model, all of the graphic attributes of the site model, which previously had to be defined on an instance by instance basis. Lighting device parameters. One of the great new features of Spotlight for lighting designers is the ability to customize the object info palette, and you're able to do this and save various combinations of palettes for different people in the project, and then recall these palettes or these setups very easily. Let's take a look at how it works. You go to the document settings to Spotlight preferences, and you'll see that in the lighting device section there's now a lot of options in here, and the one that we're interested in particularly is lighting device parameters. And when we click this, you'll see that we get a list of all of the parameters that are available in the object info palette, and you can simply turn these on and off. So you may not want these user fields, for example, or you might not want the field angle to, or the weight, or whatever it is. And once you've set this up to have the ones that you want, then you can click the save button and save this as a custom set. And when I click OK, you'll see that I have my settings there, my set. I can go back to the default or go to my set. Now what's interesting about it is that you can also customize the name as it will appear in the worksheet. So if you want to edit any of these names, you can either double click and you'll see that you can open this and change the name that's going to appear in the worksheet, or you can click the edit button to achieve the same thing. The other thing that's very useful is that you can add your own fields to the object info palette. So if we click the new button, you can then add another user field, give it whatever name you want, and you can say whether it's going to be an integer, a boolean, in other words a checkbox, just text, a real number, angle, or a dimension, and you can also enter the default value. So really quite a major improvement to be able to customize and limit the fields that you're seeing there. It makes it much more accessible without having to scroll up and down all the time. And if we just have a look at a couple of these that we have here, if I zoom in a little bit, you can see that there's one here for the designer, so it's just got these fields in it, another one for the electrician, and for the assistant, and so on. So you can easily switch between them and take advantage of the simplicity that that offers for the particular purpose that user is needing the drawing for. Lighting device colors. Another new feature in Spotlight 2013 allows you to preview the gel colors of lamps in a top plan view, and let's go ahead and open this file where we can demonstrate this. So here we have a number of lighting devices, and if we were to pick this one here, we can either change the color number here. Let's change it to 170, and you'll see that the color just instantly changes on the drawing here. Alternatively, you can double click it and choose it from the color palette if you've got the lighting device palette open here. Say the Lee colors, and so you can then choose the color you want from here. And if we look in Spotlight Preferences, you'll see that this is now a preference in here, Modify Lighting Device Color, and you can modify it by the color field, which is what we've been using. You can also modify it by the lighting device, and if we choose that option, then the color that it will get will be the color that is allocated from the attributes palette. So I think a nice new feature that allows you to better check visually what gel colors you've been using. New speaker objects. Spotlight 2013 has these new speaker objects. For anyone who's in the AV business, it allows you to hang or place individual speakers or hang arrays of speakers very easily, and to swap them out and use generic speakers or specific brands of speaker. Let's have a look at how this works. We'll switch to a file here that has some speakers in it, go back to a wireframe view, and at the top here you'll see that we have a bumper with 4 speakers hanging from it. So let's just take a look at how that was set up. So the bumper gets chosen first, and you can see that there are a number of different ones here. You can import them as well. Then you can define any number of well, up to 3 speakers. We've only defined 1 speaker so far, but let's go ahead and define a second speaker here. So we can choose the type. We'll go to this one here, and we can give it a brand and a model if we want to. And once you've got a second speaker, then if we look at the array definition here, you can see we have a list of the speakers that we've defined here, generic A and generic B. So far we're using all generic A, but I can select this one here and either delete it, or I can then select the one that I want to swap it with and click Add Swap Speakers, and it's going to put the B one in there, and you can see that our preview here is updated. If I want to put an angle in between these, say the bottom 2, I can select both of those and put, say, a 3-degree angle in there, and these are going to tilt back. If we now click OK, you'll see that this stack of speakers here is going to reflect those changes. So let's have a look at this bottom stack. So we'll select the bumper there, click Configure Array. You'll see again that there's only 1 speaker defined here. This one is not defined, so we've just got 1 speaker type. Click on the array, and you can see that this array is using those 4 speakers. The top one has a 0 angle, and the other ones have a 6-degree angle. And it's very easy to modify these. So if we wanted them angled back a bit more, we could increase that to, say, 10 degrees. Click OK, and these are going to tilt back a bit more. So there's a lot of flexibility in setting them up, and you can get this kind of result very quickly. And the other thing you can do is to look at the dispersion of the speakers. You will have noticed that there were some dispersion options in those dialogues. If we switch to this file here, you can see that here are a number of individual speakers, and these are actually showing the dispersion. You can see that you can check that option to show the dispersion range and fill it with a hatch or not. So just looking at a couple of different ones there. These are another kind of speaker, and this will show the dispersion range for that. And then over here the same thing, and another example here, so you can test whether the speakers are actually going to be reaching the audience if you've got your auditorium set out as well. So I think these new tools, the speaker array and the speaker, will allow you to set out and design these kinds of setups a lot more quickly. So that brings us to the end of the presentation. Hopefully you've learned a few things about the new features in Vectorworks 2013, and will be able to put them to good use.